hands didn't shake when I signed the loan documents. That surprised me. What didn't surprise me was what my husband said when I told him about the promotion. "So now you think you're better than me? Not congratulations. Not I'm proud of you. Not even a neutral that's great, babe. Just that." Flat, quiet, and aimed directly at something soft inside me that I hadn't known was still exposed. I had driven home from the office with the windows down even though it was 40 degrees outside, because I needed the cold air to keep me from crying before I got there. I'd been waiting 3 years to tell him news like this. 3 years of 60-hour weeks, of eating lunch at my desk, of missing his work happy hours because I had calls with the East Coast team at 7 a.m. 3 years of almost, and then finally it happened. Director of Financial Operations at 32. The kind of title that comes with a salary bump that would change things. For both of us. I had stopped at Whole Foods on the way home. Bought the good steak, the one we only got on anniversaries. I picked up a bottle of Malbec from the section we always said we'd explore someday when we had the money. I carried those bags into our kitchen in Raleigh with my heart full and stupid and wide open. He was on the couch with his laptop, some sports recap playing on the TV behind him. I set the bags on the counter and said it out loud for the first time to another human being. I got the promotion. He looked up. And then came those words. I told myself he was surprised. I told myself he was processing. I told myself that sometimes the people who love us say the wrong thing first and the right thing later, and that what mattered was later. But later never really came. I should tell you about us before I tell you the rest, because none of it makes sense without the 8 years before that night. We met during our junior year at NC State. He was finishing a degree in architecture, and I was deep in my accounting program. Already the kind of person who color-coded her study notes and set 3 alarms. We were different in every way that felt romantic at 22. He was spontaneous where I was careful. He could talk to anyone at a party. I was the one refilling drinks in the kitchen because it gave me something to do with my hands. He made me feel like I was interesting. I made him feel, I think, like someone had finally gotten him organized. We moved in together after graduation. Married at 26 in a small ceremony outside Asheville. His mother flew in from Phoenix. My parents drove up from Charlotte. It was exactly what I'd always wanted. A small thing, meaningful, not performative. For the first 2 years we were fine, genuinely fine. He was freelancing architecture projects. I was grinding my way up the ladder at a mid-sized financial consulting firm. We split expenses down the middle from a joint account, kept our own money otherwise, figured it out as we went. Then the freelancing got harder. The projects got further apart. The economy did what it does sometimes, and the construction sector contracted and his client list dried up. He applied to firms, some rejections, some near misses. One offer that fell through the week before he was supposed to start. I remember sitting across from him at our kitchen table the night that happened, watching him try to hold his face still. And I made a decision so quietly I didn't even recognize it as a decision. I picked up more. Not because he asked. Because I loved him. Because that's what you do. You step forward when the person you love steps back. You cover the mortgage when they're between projects. You pay for the groceries, the car insurance, the streaming subscriptions, the birthday dinner for his brother in Cary who never once offered to split the check. I covered it all, and somewhere along the way, it stopped being temporary. He picked up a part-time job at an architecture firm downtown, more junior than what he'd wanted, but steady. He stayed there. The years passed. He got comfortable. And I kept moving forward, because forward was the only direction I knew. By the time I got that promotion, I was already carrying about 70% of our household expenses. I had told myself it was fine. I had told myself that partnerships weren't always 50-50, and that it balanced out in other ways. He cooked most nights. He dealt with the landlord stuff. He remembered to schedule the oil changes. I had been lying to myself, but I was doing it so gently that it didn't feel like lying. The week after I told him about the promotion, he brought up the separate account idea. We were in the kitchen on a Saturday morning. He was at the counter making coffee, back to me, and he said it in this very casual tone, like he was commenting on the weather. "I've been thinking, Since your salary is going to jump, it might make sense for us to restructure things. Keep your new income separate, split household expenses evenly, and each manage our own money independently. I put down my mug. Evenly, I said. Yeah, 50-50 on the joint stuff. Rent, utilities, groceries. Clean and simple. I want to be honest here about what happened inside me in that moment, because this is the part I've never told anyone cleanly. I wasn't just angry, I was embarrassed. Because my very first instinct, was to think, okay, that's fair, maybe he's right. 8 years of absorbing his financial gaps had trained me to believe that his ease was the standard and my effort was the variable that needed adjusting. I said I'd think about it. I thought about it for about 4 days. I thought about it while I commuted, while I made the coffee every morning because he slept until 8 and my first call was at 7:30. While I folded laundry on Tuesday evenings after working a 9-hour day because he'd left it in the dryer since Sunday. I pulled up our joint account and went back 18 months. I already knew it would be bad. I didn't know it would be that bad. In 18 months, I had contributed just over $47,000 to our joint account. He had contributed $14,200. That gap wasn't because he was saving aggressively on his own side. I knew what he made. That gap was because I had been quietly, consistently, without a single conversation, funding the majority of our shared life while telling myself it was temporary. It was never temporary. I had just never said that out loud. I sat with that spreadsheet for a long time. The same part of me that had learned to be efficient, to plan ahead, to make the columns balance, that part of me finally did the math on my own marriage. I didn't say anything to him right away. That's the part of this I'm still untangling honesty. I didn't explode. I didn't confront him that night. I made dinner, watched something on TV, went to bed. But something had shifted. Something quiet and structural, like a crack in a foundation that you can't unsee once you've noticed it. I started paying attention differently. I noticed that he never asked how things were going at work. Not really. He'd ask in the way you ask someone how their day was, expecting fine. When I tried to tell him about a difficult client situation, he'd nod and then redirect to something about his own day within 2 minutes. When I mentioned that my new role came with a team I'd be managing, 5 people, the first time I'd had direct reports, he said, that's a lot of responsibility, in a tone that sounded more like a warning than pride. I noticed that he had opinions about how I spent my time now, that I was working too much, that I seemed stressed, that maybe the promotion wasn't worth it if it was going to be like this. He said these things gently, in that voice people use when they want to sound concerned but they're actually lobbying for something. I was working more. That was true, but I had also been working like this for years, and he'd never mentioned it until the work started paying off in a way that was visible and named and came with a new title on my email signature. The separate finances conversation sat between us, like something neither of us was quite ready to pick up. And then my sister-in-law called. She's married to his older brother, and she and I had always gotten along well in that easy, low-maintenance way where you don't talk every week. But when you do, it's real. She was in town for a conference and we met for coffee downtown on a Thursday afternoon. I hadn't planned to say anything, but she asked how things were going, and I guess something in my face answered before I did, because she put down her cup and said, "What's happening?" I told her about the promotion. I told her about what he'd said that first night. I told her about the separate finances proposal. I didn't show her the spreadsheet, but I told her what was in it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He did that same thing with his first girlfriend. When she got into grad school and he didn't, he found a way to make her smaller until she fit back into the size he was comfortable with." I didn't say anything. "I'm not telling you what to do," she said. "I'm telling you that I've watched him do this, and I'm telling you because I think you deserve to know it's a pattern, not a reaction." That night I drove home and sat in the car in our parking garage for 20 minutes before going inside. I had never thought of myself as someone in a bad marriage. That's the thing nobody tells you. You don't have to be miserable every day to be slowly diminishing. I hadn't been miserable. I'd been busy. I'd been useful. I'd been moving forward while pulling the weight of two people, and I'd called it love because love was the only frame I had for it. I made an appointment with a therapist, not couples therapy, just mine. I needed to think without someone else's feelings in the room. My therapist had this way of asking questions that made the obvious suddenly visible. In our second session, she asked me what I would do differently in my marriage if I knew my husband's income would never increase. Just as a thought experiment, I sat with that question for a long time. I'd have a very different conversation than the one we've been having, I said finally. What would that conversation look like? Honest, I said. It would look honest. I chose a Sunday to have it. His brother and sister-in-law were in town again, this time for a family birthday dinner at his parents' house. His parents had moved from Phoenix to Cary 3 years earlier to be closer to us. I had been dreading this dinner for different reasons now, but I went. Midway through the meal, my husband made a comment. His mother had asked about my new role, and I was in the middle of explaining it, the scope of it, the team, the client portfolio I was inheriting. And he cut across me to say, "She's going to be basically running the finance department, which means I'll basically never see her." It landed like he meant it to. A little bit funny, a little bit pointed. Enough to shift the subject. But his mother looked at me, not at him, at me. Later, while he and his brother were doing dishes, she came and sat next to me at the kitchen table. She's a quiet woman, not cold, just measured. She doesn't speak unless she means it. She said, "I noticed what happened at dinner." I said it was fine. "I've been watching you for a long time," she said. "You have been holding things together for this family in ways that nobody has said out loud, including me. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry I didn't." I had been holding it together for 4 weeks, and that was the thing that undid me. I didn't fall apart completely. I'm not built for that. But my eyes filled up, and I had to look at the ceiling for a moment. She reached over and put her hand on mine and said, "You are allowed to take up space." I came home from that dinner and I asked my husband to sit down. I had thought about doing this a dozen different ways. The spreadsheet, the list of contributions, the timeline of conversations we'd never had. I had it all organized in my head, the way I organize everything. But when I sat down across from him, I didn't use any of it. I just told him the truth in plain language. I told him I had been carrying the majority of our financial life for over 5 years. I told him I had done it without asking for recognition, because I loved him and because I believed it was temporary. I told him I now understood that I had been wrong about the temporary part and that I had contributed to that by never naming it directly. "I own that," I said. "I let this happen because I kept waiting for it to fix itself. That was on me too." I told him that the separate finances proposal had made me look at our accounts for the first time with clear eyes. I showed him the numbers. He went very still. I told him I wasn't asking him to match my income. I wasn't asking him to be something he wasn't. But I was asking for a real conversation, not a financial restructuring that protected him from the discomfort of the imbalance, but an actual acknowledgement of what had been happening and a genuine plan to address it. "I need to know," I said, "whether you're someone who can look at this and be honest about it. Because if you can't, I need to know that too." He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "I think I've been scared." It wasn't an excuse. He didn't frame it as one. He said it like a person admitting something they'd been carrying for a long time and had run out of places to put it. "Scared of what?" I asked. "That you were going to outgrow me." We didn't fix everything that night. I want to be clear about that, because I think the idea that one honest conversation can resolve years of accumulated imbalance is its own kind of lie. What happened was the beginning of a different kind of honesty between us. He started couples therapy with me the following month, his idea which mattered. We restructured our finances, but not the way he had originally proposed. We built a contribution model based on percentage of income rather than equal dollar amounts, which actually meant I contributed more in raw numbers, but the proportion felt equitable for the first time. He started paying attention differently. Not perfectly, not without backsliding, but differently. And I started letting him. That was my work, unlearning the habit of just absorbing everything quietly, of handling it before he had a chance to, of preemptively covering for him so we wouldn't have to have the uncomfortable conversation. I had been so efficient at managing our life that I had accidentally prevented him from being a full partner in it. That wasn't the whole story. He had let it happen. He had gotten comfortable. His reaction to my promotion had been small and insecure and something I won't forget. But my part in it was real, and I had to sit with that. My therapist told me that people who are very capable often carry more than their share, not because others take advantage of them, though that can happen too, but because doing so feels safer than asking for help and being disappointed. I thought about that for a long time. She wasn't wrong. It's been 7 months since that Sunday dinner. His mother texts me sometimes, just small things, a recipe she thinks I'd like, a check-in after a hard week she somehow knows about. I don't know exactly what she said to her son. I've never asked, but I think she said something because he changed in the weeks after that night in a way that felt less like performance and more like recognition. We're not the same as we were before. I don't think we'll ever be, but I'm not sure that version of us was something worth preserving, the version where I was invisible and called it love. I am 32 years old, and I am finally taking up space in my own life. I'm still learning what that looks like, but I know this. My hands didn't shake when I signed my new employment contract last month. They didn't shake because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing for someone else's reaction. I was just proud of myself. That was enough. I keep coming back to that spreadsheet, not because of the numbers, though the numbers were clarifying in a way that nothing else had been, but because of what it took me to actually open it. 18 months of transactions sitting right there in our joint account, and I had never once looked. I told myself I was too busy. The truth is, I was afraid of what I would find. And the thing about avoiding the truth is that it doesn't make the truth smaller. It just makes you smaller instead. What happened in my marriage wasn't a single betrayal. It was a slow erosion that I participated in just as much as he did. That's the part I've had to sit with the longest. It would be easier to tell this story as something that was done to me. And some of it was, his reaction to my promotion was small and insecure, and he came from a place I don't fully understand even now. But I spent 5 years making myself invisible and calling it partnership. I covered what he couldn't cover. I handled what he didn't handle. I preemptively solved every problem so we would never have to have a difficult conversation about it. I thought I was being a good wife. What I was actually doing was making it very easy for both of us to pretend things were fine when they weren't. The honest version of this story is that we both failed each other, just in different directions. What I know now is that doing the right thing and doing the easy thing are almost never the same choice. I chose easy for years. I chose quiet over honest, efficient over vulnerable, capable over real. And that kind of choosing has a cost that doesn't show up immediately. It shows up later in a kitchen on a Saturday morning when the person you love proposes a financial arrangement that makes the imbalance permanent and calls it clean and simple. His mother said something to me that I've thought about almost every day since: "You are allowed to take up space." 8 words. But I had spent so long compressing myself, my needs, my frustrations, my actual financial reality that I had forgotten that taking up space was even an option. Competence can become its own kind of hiding. When you're good at managing everything, people stop asking if you need help. And if you never ask, eventually you stop knowing how. What changed things wasn't the confrontation. It was the decision, quiet and private, to see clearly, to pull up the account, to sit with a therapist and answer the questions I'd been avoiding, to let his mother's words land instead of deflecting them. Clarity is a form of integrity, and I had been dishonest with myself long before I was ever honest with him. I am still learning what it means to be a full person inside a partnership instead of the person who holds the partnership together. It's slower work than I expected. It requires me to be uncomfortable in ways that my instinct is to immediately fix or manage. But I think that discomfort is the point. Growth that doesn't cost you anything probably isn't growth. I got promoted because I refused to stop moving forward. I'm still doing that, just in the right direction now.